thank you for joining me today to talk about how we can finish our class off the best that we can. I know as an instructor that when I'm about to do our moving into cool down for the class, I start to notice people start packing up their things. They're like, oh man, I gotta go, and they head out for the day. However, as we all know as fitness professionals, the end of class is you do some of the most important exercises of the day. We do extension, we do rotation, we do ab work, we do all the stretching and flexibility that most people need more of, but we only have about 5 to 10 minutes to get that in throughout or at the end of the class. So I want to show you a way to help organize your cool down. It should be about a 5 to 10 minute cool down, and I like to incorporate the abdominal work with some flexibility work. So that way they feel like if they leave, they're missing out on the abdominals, which we all know everyone wants more of, but then you're sneaking in that flexibility component toward the end of class. And you could be playing cool down music as this is happening. I'm not going to do very many repetitions of the exercises that I show you today, and I want you to be kind of thinking of other ways that you can throw this kind of sequence together in just a different way or with different exercises. So I'll talk my way through it with the exercises I programmed, but I want you to think about if you can do this same kind of series of exercises. You can do it in so many different ways with so many other exercises, but I'll let you know kind of why I chose that type of exercise from the beginning to the end. So first of all, most of the time in a class, we're going to be standing. Once we've finished, maybe we do like a cardio segment, we do a squatting leg segment, we do a strength segment on the upper body. So imagine this is kind of a total body strength class or a circuit training class. From there, we don't want to necessarily have everyone lay on their back and just fall asleep. So we want to make sure that we progressively bring them to the floor, not just to be efficient on time and to make it be the most comfortable workout toward the end, but to also think about the fact that maybe their heart rate has gone way up and we don't want to be bringing them down on the floor. People can start to get dizzy, people can start to feel not so well. So let's say we finished some sort of a strength or cardio segment in a class, and I like to take them down. We're bringing them down to maybe the core work slash flexibility portion of the class. I like to tell them we're going to do, I always start my flexibility core section with planks. So let's say we had the BOSU in our class. I enjoy using the BOSU for a lot of the exercises I'm going to show you today, and hopefully they're new. Maybe you take them to a plank, maybe you show them some variations, they do one hand off, they have to stabilize, they feel the rotation, maybe they do some rotation. And I've talked about on the BOSU before that if they have wrist issues, sometimes people are more comfortable moving forward of the apex of the BOSU to feel more comfortable on the wrists. You can of course also flip that BOSU over, it brings it up a little bit. You can find more plank movements, we can go through the shoulders. So this is not only strength training of the shoulders and the serratus and all those important muscles, but also that kind of side-to-side movement is sort of a rotation as well. So this is a great kind of bringing them down to the floor, getting their core work that they want, do some plank progressions. Then I will gradually take them, maybe you put the feet on the BOSU. So I go from some sort of a plank movement to potentially a movement where they're on their back doing some hip extension. So a lot of people think that abdominal work toward the end of class really just means like sit-ups and they want to do like the twisting, but they want to work the obliques, they want to work mostly this section of their body, when really we all know that the shoulders are a very important part of the core as well as the glutes, hips, very important. So I like to take them from a plank to maybe some sort of a glute raise, and on a BOSU you can do that with your feet on the ball, or I like to sometimes even, this feels nice after a class, do some glute work with their upper back on the ball, and then their head can just rest. You want to watch their head placement because you don't want them to be so far back here that they're like this. Find a comfortable position where their head is in a neutral kind of position. From there we can do single leg stuff, you can do some single leg lifts, lowers, keeping those hips stable. You can do regular lift lowers, and then you're in a really perfect position to transition into some straight up abdominal work. It's hard because as a fitness professional, we know that crunches are not necessarily the answer to what people think they are, is getting a six-pack or something, but we kind of have to give people the candy that they want at the end of class. It's something that makes people feel good, feels like they're working that part of their body, so we have to kind of give them that sometimes. What I like to do is start to sneak some flexibility in here. So with the BOSU, what I really like is you're not only able to engage the abdominals, and you could do what we call in Pilates a single thigh stretch, but you lean back and you can give them the option. They have to kind of find that sweet spot where their hips need to go, and this is going to be a much harder option than maybe keeping their foot on the floor. I can still feel my abdominals engaging even while I'm pulling this knee into my chest. And what's super cool is I can lean back a little more and get even more of a hip flexor stretch because my leg is at a decline. So if I do it on this side, you can kind of see a little bit better. I feel a hip flexor stretch just a little bit while I'm doing this, and I'm getting a nice work in my abdominals as well. So you can hold that position, and the fact that they're on that incline, they are going to feel it. And then let's say they're on the ground and you don't have a BOSU available, you're here getting a nice glute stretch, you're getting your stretching, and then you can hold this. What I like to take people in next is to keep this leg really active and start to stretch the hamstrings, but in an active way. So they're actually using their quad muscle and their hip flexors to work that leg and to work these abdominals and to get a stretch in the back of the leg. So you're again sneaking in the abdominal work and sneaking in the flexibility that we're looking for in class. You can even hold here and do some like leg circles or some side drops. So really I'm starting to feel my core working, letting that leg fall to the side quite a bit. And they're just holding onto that leg, getting another stretch on the other side. From the hip flexor, from the ab, pull in, another really important way, and I'm kind of backing up really quick, is we want to tell our clients the importance of our legs moving in opposition of each other and why that is so good for us, because the sacrum is meant to be able to move independently on either side of itself, and it's also known as hip decoupling. So when we do lunges and we do hip lifts and single leg work, we're actually helping to decouple our hips and release our low back and help with that kind of flexibility, even deepen our sacrum. People with SI joint issues, this can benefit. So I like to, even on the glute bridge, I missed this, is add a hugging that leg, if they can, to that lift that they do. And you can do that here, or you can do it with their back on the BOSU. And that just really, find my position, that really helps them feel a big stretch. And this is a lot of balance even too on that BOSU. So working here, and I can barely lift up any higher. Obviously need to work on those hip flexors, but you can feel that stretch as well as that hip decoupling kind of opposition movement. Research more on that if you're curious about it, hip decoupling. Then I like to get them into a twisting position. So let's say I went from the plank, I went to the hip lifts, working the glutes, working the back side of the body. Then I did some pulling the leg in, doing some like single thigh stretch, what you would call in Pilates. Then I take them to some twisting. So you can do twisting in many ways. I like to sometimes have them sit on something, like let's say we used a step-in class or the BOSU, or in our case at Pro Sports Lab we have what are called step 360s that are excellent. Having them sit on that so that they feel like their hip flexors can relax a little bit. I'll have them do what we call in Pilates the saw. So they're working to sit up really tall, which all of us need to work on, as well as when they exhale and twist, sometimes I'll have them reach their arms as well, and they twist toward one side, and a lot of the time you see the arms go with them, so sometimes I'll just have them put their hands on their hips so they know that just their sternum is moving, and they're keeping their hips nice and square to the front of the room, and it's a small movement. But if you add the arms, you can exhale, twist, maybe they look behind themselves, and you're feeling the obliques start to contract. Then we inhale back to the center, exhale, twist. I like using that Pilates breath, pursed lips, encouraging those ribs to come down instead of hyperextending that spine. And adding that twist is really good for that spine, really good for that blood flow, and helps with breathing as well. From twisting of the spine, sometimes I'll even do like these guys, that's a little bit of twisting, but I like that big twist at the end. Then I go straight into extension, and I tend to see that not enough instructors do extension of the spine at the end of their classes, and more people really need that strength as well as mobility in the back of their body. So from the BOSU, what I love about the BOSU is that it gives people a little more room, because the majority of the time on the mat, they have a hard time lifting up even off the mat. It gives you a little more room to work with. But it almost gives you too much room, so as an instructor, you're encouraging them to engage their legs behind them and relax their head down toward the floor. And when they come up with the BOSU, you can go super high, but all I ask my classes to do is to go into one long straight line and to also make sure that they keep their chin down. We a lot of the time see this because people are like, oh, I'm so high, I'm getting so high, and they're looking forward. So a lot of the times I'll say, if you can see me in the front of the room, or if you can see yourself in the mirror, there's a mirror in front of them, then you need to bring your eyes down to the floor. And sometimes I'll ask them to look at a certain focal point in front of them. But they're coming up into a nice, just neutral spine, feeling everything down the back of their body, keeping their legs down. And then I'll ask them to sometimes add that side bending. So I ask them to pretend like they're an airplane and they're soaring over the floor. Then they can add a twist here too, while they're in that neutral spine. Twisting. But we're working, I'm also encouraging them, especially if they're on the BOSU, to pull their abdominals in underneath them. So pulling their abdominals in underneath them, working the back of the body, thinking about a long spine. And I like to give them that visual as well. Extension with twist, extension with side bending. And then I like to actually, you can see that on the mat too. You can do those same things on the mat, that extension, lowering down. Maybe you do swimming. You can do swimming on the BOSU as well. And then I go back into some flexion and I add some more stretching with that flexion. You could even, while they're on their stomach, reach back, grab a leg, get some quad stretch in there. But what I love about combining the roll up with hamstring stretch is what I'm going to do next. What I love about that is what you'll see in a second. So you can take them to maybe with a strap, maybe you can use a band, depending on what you used in the class. And if someone has done Pilates for a long time, they may not need the band, but it's smart to start with it so everyone feels comfortable and successful initially. So I have them start with the band and have them sit up nice and tall and then slowly roll themselves down. So we're doing a Pilates roll up here, pulling their abdominals in, rolling down all the way, as slow as they can, taking this slow, and then inhaling here, exhaling, trying to do the same thing on the way up. And maybe at this point they're like, uh-oh, I need a little help, I need to use my band. Or maybe they're just fine, they reach forward. What's great about the roll-up is this is a nice stretch as well already, but I can actually kind of offset my spinal flexion ability versus my hamstring flexion, or hamstring stretch ability. So most people who can reach their arms to their feet really easily, my hamstrings are not actually as flexible as they look right now. My spine is more flexible. So I'm able to fold really far forward, but my hamstrings are actually pretty tight, and you'll find that out in a second. So that you can have them stay here for a second, pull those abdominals in, maybe even look at their belly button and watch themselves pull their tummy in. And then as they come back down again, maybe they need a little more assistance, or if they don't, they just leave that down. And then at the bottom, you add a hamstring stretch. So I like to add the hamstring stretch here. And we're keeping this leg nice and active. This leg comes up, and you're feeling that stretch all the way to the back of the hamstring. You could do a little side to side. Then you bring that leg down. You incorporate the abs again. We start to roll up. We sit up nice and tall, and then you can switch it to the other leg. But you're incorporating that roll up with some hamstring stretches as well. It's kind of a 2 for 1. Then I take them to side bending. That's usually my last thing I like to do because it takes you almost to standing. So some side bending options are going to be, I like this position with one foot in front of the ankle of the bottom leg. Most people can keep this bottom knee down and be okay. You can do it from the elbow if people have wrist issues, just coming up and over. You can do it from the hand if they don't have wrist issues, just spread those fingers wide, keeping the knee down. Or you can do it from the feet, just make them reach those legs out a little bit further, and then they come up and over. What's important about this exercise is I like to really emphasize the inhale on the way up because we're expanding the lungs, we're getting the oxygen to the muscles that we want them to feel at the end of class. We want them to feel that kind of rush of energy and rush of endorphins. So what's going to help them do that is if they inhale, they breathe in and they maybe look up if that feels okay. Again, taking all of those options, and this feels just as good as with my legs up, so just getting more and more ab work if those legs are up. And then bring it down, maybe do 3 to 4 on each side. So on the other side, same thing, feeling that nice extension, expansion. It should feel really, really good at the end of class. And then they're already kind of in a seated position, moving them from the roll up into kind of a seated position. making their way into standing. Sometimes at the end of class, I'll even have them bend their knee, find a nice hip flexor stretch, and from here, sometimes I'll have them tuck their feet underneath and explain to them that we could make standing up look really, really ugly, or how do we want to end the class today? Why do we do all those lunges and those squats throughout class? Let's try to put that to practice and stand up as cleanly and strong as we can. So if someone is doing okay, sometimes I'll give them the option to do this, come up and then come up, or if they want to kind of really challenge themselves, come all the way up. Hopefully most of your class is able to do that comfortably, but practicing practicality, that what we're going to have to do outside on our own. If we fell down, we should be able to get back up and not hurt ourselves. So I hope you find that useful. I find that if I do kind of that series and that mental process of keeping it efficient, keeping it makes sense, everything kind of flows together, as well as useful, it's a really nice way to kind of plan out my cool down for classes. They're sneaking in the abdominals, they're getting that flexibility, and hopefully they don't leave early. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great day.